Good evening. This is October 16th, 2024. This is the Auburn Finance Committee meeting. Allow me to read tonight's remote participation script. We do not have anybody participating remotely. However, let me just read this. This open meeting of the Town of Auburn Finance Committee is being conducted both in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed to participate remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For the public to join the meeting remotely by telephone, it's 1-786-535-3211 with an access code of 991-599-357. Or the public can join via computer at global.gotomeeting.com/join/991-599-357. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by Auburn Cable Television. Good evening. So tonight's agenda, we have our call to order, which we've just done. The second is to review and vote on recommendations of the November 13th, 2024 special town meeting warrant articles. Then we'll review one transfer, some transfers that were done administratively by the town accountant, and then some minutes, and we should be done. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. So we'll move right over to the attendance. Well, we told Sharon said we did not have to do the attendance formally. No. Only if we're doing remote. So we're paring back on our remote script.
Love it.
Thank you, though. So warrant articles. Mr. Kazanovich, did you want to touch on
Sure.
Article 2? Which is
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into the summary of the warrant, I just want to let you know that Dr. Chamberlain is participating remotely. So if there are any school questions, she's available to answer any specifics you may have. In terms of the warrant, there are 23 warrant articles being presented for the November 15th Fall Town Meeting. As you can see, I prepared a summary by warrant article that breaks it down by funding source. So Article 2, which is requesting an amendment to the annual town meeting of $336,662, of which $283,662 is general fund revenues, $50,000 is through ambulance receipts, and $3,000 through other available funds, which I believe is solid waste trash bag. So as you can see, the format identifies the funding source as it relates to the warrant articles. The total ask between Articles 2 and 23 is $1,965,625. How did we get there? If you turn to page 2 of the packet that I handed out, it's going to show you the difference between what we estimated at the annual town meeting and the revised estimate based upon a number of things that have already been certified. State aid is final, will result in that $1,965,000. We did have some additional new growth above and beyond what we estimated that has been certified by DOR at $822,000. Those details are provided in the supplemental pages beyond page 2. We made the recommendation as proposed as if the warrant articles are going to be approved at town meeting. It does allow for general taxation at the full 2.5%. I can tell you our growth in state aid from the final numbers is roughly only $171,000. So because we had limited growth in state aid, we're relying more on general taxation, local receipts, and tax levy to fund our operational needs. We're hoping the state will be somewhat more beneficial for the upcoming year. We know roughly $1.2 billion is being used to house and shelter the migrants. Hopefully, if they can find housing for those individuals, it may free up some money that's going to trickle back to the local municipalities. So with that being said, that's a summary of what the warrant is requesting, Mr. Chairman, and be happy to answer any questions that the Finance Committee may have. I don't know if you want to go through each warrant article and ask any questions relative to the change.
Any questions as we get started? Do you want to take a few moments to?
Through the chair. I think two of the larger increases, at least in Article 2, were the HR generalist, which I think we had taken out of the budget entirely, which is now coming back, and then fire overtime, which is an extra $100,000 towards that. So I'm curious about both of those, just 'cause I know.
So I think it came with some pain that we had to eliminate the generalist position. I think the opportunity presented itself where the position was vacant, and it allows us to preserve other jobs throughout general government when we made a recommendation at the annual town meeting. I think we indicated at that time that we would prioritize that for the fall if general fund revenues became available, and they did become available. This would allow us to fund this position beginning this January at a cost of $31,000. That position is needed more today than it was at the annual because we lost an individual at the school department, a long-term employee that had some HR functions that no longer are available to us, and we had some lengthy discussions with school administration on the desire to fill that position, and they're 100% behind this as well. On the fire OT, I can't tell you the number of transfers that you addressed last fiscal year. The situation continues to be a concern as a result of some long-term IOD injuries that are still being realized. Out of that, 150 is coming from ambulance receipts, so it's a net 50 on general taxation. And we've addressed that through some outside warrant articles as well. So we're hoping, as a result of bringing on some individuals in the latter part of the fiscal year, that we're able to somehow manage that and contain it much better.
Thank you.
If I may, I know the question isn't being asked, but we also did plug the regular reserve account because of some uncertainties as it relates to fleet, which is another cost that really is escalating beyond any control we have. Labor costs have gone up, supply costs have gone up. We just want to provide a reserve account that we can turn to in those situations that require some adjustments, whether it's snow and ice, whether it's fleet, whether it's police, fire, overtime, or any other need that is really not on the radar screen right now. I always aim to have a 5% reserve account of our total operating budget. We're not at 5%. We're inching closer, but that was my goal, to at least provide a reserve account with a 5% value of the total operating budget.
When was the last time we went to the full 2.5? Is this the first time in quite a while?
This is the first time we've gone to 2.5 in 15 years.
Does it still remain a goal? I mean, to try and, is there any chances that we come out below that number? Are there any strategies that can be utilized?
So I think because we had annual state aid growth of about $1 million. We're not even close to that this year. So I think, and I was always cautioned relying on state aid to balance our operating budget, because when you rely on state aid, and there have been years that, and Patrick may remember when we actually lost state aid, and now you're turning towards general fund revenue to plug that gap. I think we've been fortunate that we haven't taxed the 2.5. We built up excess levy of roughly $10 million. That's a good thing, but it could be a bad thing as well. I think there's, clear recognition that there is an affordability factor as it relates to other fixed costs that are being asked of us, but we're cautious on utilization of that because I think it's created some financial stability to the town, and it benefits us in many other ways that saves our taxpayers some money.
I just had
Yes.
about halfway down where the debt and the insurance line, you're asking for a small increase. I thought, I don't have the budget in front of me, and for some reason, I thought last year we had seen a decrease or some of our debt was going down. So is this from a recent transaction that for this year, we're bringing it back up to 990 from 960? I'm just wondering why that's, moving up.
Okay, so that's insurance and bonds.
Right.
So because of our increased activity in IOD, we have to escrow a medical amount every time a claim is filed. We have to put that in reserve. That's part of the policy. So that's really what's
So
driving.
it's really on the insurance side, it's not on the bond side, which is, that answer.
Right, it's on the insurance side.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
I also want to say, even though we're increasing our tax levy by 2.5, we're not raising $1.2 million to fund debt and interest on the high school. That has been retired. So that's going to result in a savings that will mitigate some of that 2.5 increase.
Can you just explain that one to me? Because I was just looking at as well, that I knew the high school was falling off. So how does that,
So we
Taxpayer.
raised that outside of the levy limit. All right, that was a debt exclusion vote. We no longer have to raise 1.2 million. So that's going to translate to savings to the taxpayers of the community. How that balances out against 2.5, 2.5 represents approximately about the same, 1.3 million. So if we're not raising 1.2, it should neutralize the level of tax increase because it offsets one another.
So if I understand that correctly, so we're at 2.5% because the price went up, but then we also have an expense that's gone away.
Yes.
So does that mean people's tax bill won't actually change 2.5%?
All things being equal, that would be correct. But we know residential values, what this year, when we're about to set a tax recap in the next month, residential values are up about 10%. So if residential values were flat and we increased by 2.5 through, as allowed under Prop 2.5, and we realize a saving by retiring debt, if everything else was equal, it would be a net zero. But we know that's not the case, and it's going to fluctuate by residential home values, because on the average, it's about 10%. Is that, it's about 10% for this year?
The Fed announced
I thought it was 2.5% regardless of the appreciation of the property. Like
You're,
the
no,
property-
you're allowed to increase the level of taxation by 2.5%. But there's always a shift in values one way or another based upon sales, based upon assessed value. And assessed value is determined by the sales activity on homes over the course of time.
Right, but I guess we could talk later. I always thought that, because I said, back when I knew less, that if you keep it at 2.5% and you're increasing the value of the property, then you're going to go over 2.5%. And then I was corrected, I thought, which was that you still had to stay within 2.5% regardless of how much you change the value of the property. Is that not?
So you are correct. So if we went up 2.5, and this is the first time we've done so in 15 years, and then you have a shift in value of 10%, the level of taxation is going to go up higher than 2.5%.
So you can go higher than 2.5%. Is that what you just said?
We have no control over that.
No,
We
I
can,
know, but I'm
we
just
can
saying-
only cap the additional amount of revenue through taxation by 2.5%. There's a shift by class within, but no, overall, outside of new growth, you can only increase taxes by 2.5%. As a general rule of thumb, we do have excess levy. We could increase taxation by 15% if we want to, because we have that excess levy. But we choose not to do that. This,
To answer your question, when you have the, like your tax bill, and it'll say the, percentage by value in which you're going to get taxed on, that can only go up by 2.5%. However, the value of the assessment can,
Yeah.
can move in any space. But that point X, whatever percentage piece where it says, percentage of, by that can only move by 2.5%. And the values are going to go up even more because the Fed announced that they're slowly coming down. So when the Fed comes down, the interest rates are going to come down, and then the
It's
market's going
strange
to.
how the rates go up and the values go up and the rates go down and the values go up. But somehow they're supposed to be connected. But that's a different conversation.
Okay, any other general questions? If not, we can start going through these, and just as a reminder, Sharon was good enough to put on what our motions on these would be. It's either to recommend approval, not recommend approval, defer to the petitioner, or take no position at this time and make a recommendation at town meeting. So if nobody has any additional questions, we'll just start, we'll go through them one by one, and
If we're moving on from Article 2, I do have a couple other questions.
yes, please.
Article 9, the 107,000 for core switch replacement. I just am curious what that is. I
Mike, he is on
don't know if
remote.
that's related to the
oh,
EMS or if that's,
Mike is
yes,
on.
Mike Marino is online, so he can explain the request to you.
Mike, did you hear, can you answer that one on Article 9 for us?
Could you repeat the question, please?
I'm just curious what the core network switch replacement is. If you can just give like a, explain like we're elementary schoolers version of it.
Yeah, no problem. So our buildings are connected through a fiber network, which means that each building has a switch that connects the physical fiber to it, and back the core switch is the one that basically controls everything. So it does all of our routing. It connects all of the other buildings to it. So it's pretty much the most important switch that we have because it does all the work. So therefore, it's actually a beefier switch than the ones that we have at the other buildings. So that's why it's a lot more expensive. And replacing what we have now for our old switches, we have basically either a 1 or a 2 gig connection to each building for speeds, and replacing this switch would allow us to improve that to a 10 gig connection to each location.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
For the remainder, I guess we'll go through them. If you have questions, we've got representatives here as we get to the individual ones. But for Article 2, I won't read the whole thing. We'll see if town meeting will vote to amend Article 3 of May 7th, 2024 annual town meeting as follows. And these were the ones that the town manager just went over with us. Any additional questions relative to that article?
Motion to recommend approval?
So we have a motion in a second?
Second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
That was the motion to recommend, right?
Yes, sir. Okay, Article 3, See if the town meeting will vote to amend Article 12 for the Medicaid reimbursement amount approved for the FY '25 at the May annual town meeting from $140,000 to $160,000 to better align with actual and anticipated general fund revenues. This article funds supplies and medical, therapeutic, and educational services for significantly disabled special needs students, as well as tuition transportation to and from outside placements within the district for special needs students, or act on anything thereto.
Motion to recommend approval.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Article 4, also from the school committee. See the town meeting will vote to appropriate $18,639 from the McKinney-Vento receipts from free cash to reflect additional funding issued from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education in June 2024 to the Auburn School Department operating budget for fiscal 2025 to fund additional transportation costs incurred for students to and from school who have become homeless during the fiscal year.
Motion to recommend approval.
No questions? A motion to recommend approval? And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Article 5, is also school committee to see if the town meeting will vote to amend Article 14 from the McKinney-Vento receipts approved fiscal year '25 at the May town meeting from $23,481 to $30,805 to align with the actual funds received to fund additional transportation costs, same as the Article 4 for students that have become homeless. Any questions on that one?
Motion to recommend approval.
We have a motion to recommend approval and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Article 6, coming from the Executive Director of Senior Center / Elder Affairs, to see if town meeting will vote to repurpose the balance of $25,942.23 from the Auburn Senior Center frozen pipe account for miscellaneous building and HVAC repairs at the Auburn Senior Center, or act on anything thereto. I don't know if we have anybody from the Senior Center to,
We do not, but the director did provide an explanation, which Karen has. I don't know if it's been provided in your packet?
No.
Okay.
So the sum of the 25,942.23 is what was remaining after the insurance and the appropriation for all the repairs that were made from the frozen pipe. And the amount is being requested to be spent on miscellaneous building repairs and/or for the HVAC system. They need some HVAC system repairs. They've had trouble with their heat and their AC units.
any questions?
Motion to recommend approval.
So a motion and a second. Recommending for approval. All in favor?
Aye.
From the town manager, Article 7, see if the town meeting will vote to appropriate $250,000 from free cash to the town stabilization fund.
Motion to recommend approval.
Any questions before we go to the motions?
Mr. Chairman, can I just give a quick update on free cash? The certification has been provided in your packet for you tonight. Free cash was certified on or about October 2nd in the amount of, for the general fund, $19,234,268. As you recall, we appropriated $4.6 million out of free cash for the purchase and acquisition of the property of Chuck Steakhouse, which is about to be demolished by the end of the month. That left a balance in that account, which is going to be addressed in another warrant article tonight. But in terms of free cash, policy allows for a use of 50% of the net gain. So we subtracted 4.6, because that was appropriated for the acquisition of the property and for demolition costs. And based upon that revision, that reduction, we recomputed our free cash based upon our new certification. Under the policy, that net gain of $2.2 million allows us to expend $1.2 million. And that is on this page, for any one-time purchases, whether it's OPEB, whether it's stabilization, or it could be for a one-time capital expense. As a result of that, the funding articles for free cash on all the warrant articles being requested is $903,000. Under the 50% rule, we're allowed to appropriate and expend $1.235 million. So we're making a recommendation of 9.3. We're not going to the full 50%. which would leave about $331,000 of available free cash that we can appropriate if we had to between now and our next certification.
Thank you. Any additional questions on the free cash? Sir?
Why not take advantage of that amount and just put it in OPEB?
Because in addition to the 500,000, we are also contributing about 200,000 from employee contributions. So we are funding our OPEB annually, provided that the 500 is available every year, and it has been, about $700,000 a year. That rate of contribution puts us far ahead of most communities on a ratio basis of our unfunded liability.
In comparable communities to Auburn?
I would even say larger communities.
Okay. Thank you.
While you bring up that comparison, can you just speak to, because I think there will be folks go to what Steve said, going to 2.5 and pushing the taxpayers to the, to what might be their edge. These decisions, the fiscal decisions that are made, where does the town stand in terms of its health, in terms of its fiscal health in general, and then compared to our neighbors in comparative communities?
So I would say our fiscal health is very stable. We just went through a bond rating. They maintained a AA+ on the Standard & Poor's. But that being said, I think the rating agencies are very cautious about the economy and about the health of the state, which most municipalities rely on to fund a good portion of their budget. In our case, it's probably about 22% of our budget is through state aid. So we all know the state was going through some difficult times last year. The revenue projections were below. They have seemed somewhat to rebound, but we have some, or they have some additional concerns as it relates to future growth, as it relates to economic stability, and as it relates to what the migrant shelter situation is going to do for the state, because they've only funded the migrant tuition and sheltering cost through December of this year. So when we get to December 31st, our $104 a day to educate a student is going to evaporate unless the state has a supplemental budget. And I know they're considering that, but I just don't know, we don't know what impact that's going to have on our local community. So I think we want to be cautious about using whatever reserves we have. It's a policy that we don't use free cash or stabilization to fund our operational side of the budget, which the town did do several years ago and put us in a rating with Moody's and Standard & Poor's as cautious, because we were relying on reserves to fund our operational side of the budget, and you never want to do that. So although we have it, we as a matter of practice, we don't use it, and you shouldn't use it. That's any good financial operating municipality will tell you not to use that. And Patrick, I know you can.
Yep, you're exactly right.
Thank you.
Good.
Any additional questions on Article 7? We had, before we had some discussion, we did have a motion from Michael to recommend approval on that one. Do we have a second on that? We have a second. All in favor? Recommend approval?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, one other comment as it relates to reserve. I think it's important to remember that feeding our stabilization account is important, because we've used that to offset some large capital purchases, whether it be a ladder truck, whether it be a high-cost capital item. We typically try to throw 50% of that cost as an initial down payment to minimize our borrowing cost. So as you know, borrowing costs, interest rates are up. It's costing us more to borrow items. We try to, in difficult times, try to infuse as much as we can through reserve accounts to try to minimize our short-term borrowing costs.
Thank you. Article 8, again from the town manager, see if the town meeting will vote to appropriate $500,000 from free cash to the town OPEB trust or anything relative.
Motion to recommend approval?
I'm sorry.
Just a quick question on that. I just feel like we haven't, or at least I haven't really checked in on that one in a while, but how are we doing on closing that gap on the unfunded liability? Because I know when we had first started years ago.
Yeah.
Adding this in, there was a shift in, I think, the agreement with the town where 65-plus employees were moving on to Medicare, and then we were funding this, was bringing the interest rate down. So how are we doing on closing that gap? I'm not expecting this
So
to go
I
away.
think the unfunded liability is driven primarily by the discount rate that is, and as we know, that has been fluctuating. The higher the discount rate, the lower the liability becomes. So, because we're getting a greater return on our portfolio. I think we have 10 million in the OPEB?
Yes.
10 or 11 million, where between the appropriation, between our employee contribution and our rate of return that we're getting on our investment, we are realizing about $1 million gain a year, which is, I think, pretty good.
Yeah.
So I know we were at a funding ratio at one point. Unfunded liability went from 59 million down to 36 million. Because of the discount rate, it's now up to last actuary, like 49 million. But we're closing the gap.
Yeah.
So I think if we continue to fund at this rate, it's a great thing. It's going to reduce that cap. And ultimately, we should be able to rely on that return once we get to a comfort level to fund a portion of our operating costs as it relates to healthcare. That's the goal. So as we see these healthcare costs go up, if we could somehow offset it by the rate of return on our OPEB, it minimizes that impact on our taxpayers.
Yeah.
Thank you. Again, so I think on Article 8, we had a motion
Motion to recommend approval?
to recommend approval, and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Article 9, from the IT director, we already had a discussion on this one, to see if the town meeting will vote to appropriate $107,000 from free cash for core network switch replacement.
Motion to recommend approval?
So I have a motion to recommend approval and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next few are from the fire chief. Article 10, to see if town meeting will vote to appropriate $75,000 from ambulance receipts to establish an EMS contingency account or act on anything relative thereto. Could I ask what a EMS contingency account would entail? The deputy chief?
Good evening, everyone. The contingency account is currently at this time for ambulance receipt money. As you know, we have to go through town meeting in order to use it. Occasionally, we have issues where we have a life pack monitor, one of the heart monitors, EKG machine. They're in the range of $30,000 to $40,000 if one of those breaks, and we have no mechanism of really replacing it unless we dip into the normal operational budget. Being that there is availability in the ambulance receipt money, we're just looking to set up a fund that, with oversight through the CFO, that if we needed to go into that for that kind of equipment or something EMS related that was unforeseen, it's there that we don't have to wait until the following town meeting in order to try to get that money or try to take it from the tax levy side.
Question?
As simple as equipping the ambulance with medical supplies. Typically, a transfer will come in because those costs are escalating, especially during COVID, and supplying the ambulance with those medical supplies was very costly. We did rely on a portion of ARPA funds for a period of time, but there was a lot of uncertainty in the actual supply of materials as well as the cost. So I think this would provide a backstop in the event that they needed to replenish those ambulances as well during the course of the year.
Is that 75 in excess something we're anticipating to be like an annual, like moving forward, that we would or is this just like a one-time, we're gonna put it in there, see how it's going, and then,
So because it's an outside warrant article, if there is a balance, it's allowed to be carried over, and they could always do a supplemental
okay.
at another town meeting.
Would there be a cap on what that ambulance receipt account could hold? Is there any sort of, and this one's asking for $75,000 to fund it, but would there be a cap of $75,000 to that account, or could that potentially grow over the course of
So
years?
typically, if it's set up as a revolving account, you have to establish a cap. This is an outside warrant article, so I think based upon historical data, they are estimating, and I hope they're estimating on a high side of 75, knowing that if it is needed, there'll be adequate funding to provide for what they need. I think that's something that could be monitored, and could be either increased or decreased based upon the level of need, based upon trends and data.
Why this type of account as opposed to a revolving account?
Well, a revolving account would require a change to the bylaw. It's a little more complicated. We actually talked about transitioning the current receipt reserve for appropriation account into a revolving account. But that account has $5 million on it, and I don't think that would be supported by the Department of Revenue, a revolving account with that kind of money in it, so.
And Deputy, you mentioned oversight and approvals. What will the process be by which this account could be accessed and funds utilized from it?
We're really open to anything, but we were thinking we'd just go through the CFO.
Questions?
My question, the types of things you're talking about needing to replace, like in an emergency situation, those the kinds of things that are built into the existing capital budget?
Yes. Yeah, for the monitors, like when we replace them all together, it's usually, actually that is done on the EMS capital side, or it's done in an outside article to replace them. The monitors aren't replaced annually. They're one of those things that comes up, long term, when we replace them. The other things we're looking for this fund is if, like the town manager said, medical supplies, they change, the cost of drugs, things go up. If we need more money that way, then we'd come here. The goal is not to use this account, but to have the access to the account in case we do need it.
And actually, we thought about setting up a contingency account within the general fund operating budget or a reserve account, just like the salary reserve. The problem being is if they don't use it, it closes out to the general fund and it doesn't revert back to ambulance receipts. So this is kind of one way it restricts it and it doesn't get lost in the general fund.
You got to sort of think all that stuff through, because if you don't implement it a certain way, you're going to cut off your nose to spite your face. So I get it. It's logical to me and it makes sense. And it is being monitored through the CFO. It's not as though there's a checkbook sitting in a desk in a fire department. And there is the warrant puts an amount on it.
My only, when we've done other, and I'm completely drawing a blank, we've outlined certain strategies and we put them in writing as to how the accounts will be utilized and carry over and whether they're reported back, not part of the budget, but as, they'd be reported back to finance to see, where the account stands, things of that nature. I don't think it has to be done now, and I don't know what the committee's thoughts are, is that there's some sort of structure to how what the intentions of when it was established, what the intentions were and what the structures were for approvals and things of that nature, as opposed to administrations change and, this account was established, back in 2024, and now it's just sort of this account that's out there that no one really knows what the strategy was behind it or the guidelines or the thought processes behind it at the time. So I guess I understand the things come up quickly and, there's back orders and you got to place purchases and there's, we can't have trucks out of service because a piece of equipment goes down and, but I guess additional accounts that sort of sit off to the side that really don't get reported on would be not concerning, because everybody in this room does the right thing, but I guess I'd like a little more structure to it, behind the scenes at least.
If I may, I think, we thought this through. And I'm going to give you, for instance, so say during the course of the year, the medical supplies, it's $35,000, it's 100% expended by December. And if transfer is required from within the fire department, or even from the reserve account, the general fund is subsidizing a portion of the ambulance cost that should be coming out of ambulance. And that's problematic because when we calculate the indirects or the total costs, and when we put together the fire department budget, when we recoup or have an offset of ambulance receipts, it covers 100% of the medical supply cost. We lose the ability to recoup that if you're subsidizing it through the general fund, and that becomes a problem. So we thought about many different ways we could handle that, and this is basically the cleanest way. And I gotta believe that through oversight of the CFO, with the recommendation through fire, that there will be some restrictions on the use. It can't be used for anything but either medical equipment, ambulance-related, or medical supplies.
And if I could, through the chair, just point out that it's sort of a given because they're not coming to us looking for money to fund something. The ambulance goes out and it comes through their own receipts. So it's staying within their own earnings, to sort of, it's not like they're going to the police station for ambulance receipts. The ambulance receipts are generated and pushed through the fire department. So,
No, I do understand that, but I just
Yeah.
think of my time on this committee, I think the fire budget is the most difficult budget to deal with because there is this unknown ambulance receipts, because I understand the revenue comes in and portions of salaries are paid here and portions of equipment is purchased out of it. So it's a difficult, it's difficult to get a full understanding of where all the dollars that make the fire department, the fire rescue department operate come from. So this just feels like it's yet another account that's sitting off, on top of that ambulance receipts. And I understand the easy access, but it's just another piece that,
It's really no different than Shore Enterprise, Packagug Golf Course, and cable access, because there are also other costs that are not directly appropriating within their budget that they absorb because they're on the town side. So I understand it's really not a clean way to identify 100% of the cost, but that's the only way we're allowed to capture those costs.
should this article have another line in it, though, that says something to the effect of to be utilized for EMS supplies, equipment, it outlines a little bit more like some of the previous articles mentioned, exactly where the intentions of it. If this is establishing the account, should this warrant article have like one more additional line that says the EMS contingency account will be utilized to for purchasing EMS equipment, supplies that are needed in a timely manner or something of that nature? If this is the article that will forever establish this account.
But this is not a perpetual account. This is
not.
just the annual account.
This is the annual, so this every year
I
we
mean,
have.
they're allowed to carry over the balance, but this does not establish an account that could be utilized every single year.
Okay. So each year, every town meeting, we potentially could see this
You
one
would have to vote a new one.
every time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That clarifies that. Any additional questions? Okay,
Motion to recommend approval?
we have a motion to recommend approval and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Article 11, see the town meeting will vote to appropriate $28,000 from free cash, which was received by the fire department from an insurance reimbursement to the fire rescue department overtime account. Any questions on the Article 11 for the deputy? Trevor?
Quick question.
Yes.
Just to circle back to something else from before, why was it that at the senior center, the insurance money that they received is flowing back into a specific line item, but then the insurance money that they received is flowing into free cash and they're pulling it out of free cash? Or am I misunderstanding that?
So
They're looking to
This
utilize.
was a reimbursement to the general fund for an IOD claim that typically goes back into the fire overtime account. In order to get at that, this was reported the end of June, Karen? Do you remember?
For an injury This was for an injury last year
24.
Okay.
that came in late.
Historically, all insurance reimbursements, because they have to fill those shifts.
Yep.
Because they're minimum manning, forces an OT. So that we use those insurance reimbursements from IOD claims under the insurance policy to go back into the overtime to offset the costs to fill that shift.
Oh, I'm not questioning the cost itself. It's just, there was another article before where there was a transfer.
Because that
of
went into a
funds to-
special revenue account. This went into the general fund,
just-
which closes out to free cash.
Okay.
To be clear, I think we previously did a similar article to put the insurance funds into the frozen pipe account.
Okay.
So like, this is almost like the
That's like
precursor
the,
of that.
okay, got it.
If I'm not misstating this, right?
Opioid funds
Yeah,
at the annual town meeting.
yeah.
That makes, okay.
Yeah.
You got me.
Motion to recommend?
Okay, on Article 11, sorry, who had the, Patrick, was the motion to recommend approval?
Yeah, you can.
That's good. And do we have a second to that? All in favor? Article 12, see if town meeting will vote to appropriate $118,000 from general fund revenue sale of inventory account from the sale of a fire engine and ambulance to the fire rescue department equipment account in the amount of $34,000 and to the fire overtime account in the amount of $84,000. Questions on this one?
I'll just ask again, like, what is the total number that's going into the overtime account this year? Because it just seems like we have got a bit of a runaway train going on. I don't know how many transfers we've processed in the last year. We're adding $100,000 to the article, in Article 2. Like, what do we do to staunch the bleeding here? Because, like, this, I don't know that we've spent more time talking about anything other than fire department. Like, it's possible at this point we've talked about fire department overtime more than everything else combined. So I'm just, it's starting to turn into a thing that's like concerns me. And, you know, $500,000 towards overtime in a given year seems like a lot for a budget that's, it's a pretty sizable percentage of the budget.
I couldn't agree with you more. And so that's something we've looked at, that's something we've discussed. I have been told that it should diminish as we bring on, when are we getting?
We currently are at full staff. We have
The academy.
we have some going to the academy November 15th. We just had 2 come out of the academy. We have 6 that currently don't count towards shift.
So when you say full staff though, like,
Well,
let's clarify what that actually means.
I'll get there. For
Yeah.
you. And currently we have 1 out on long-term IOD and we have 5 others out on their own injuries with broken arms, hip replacements, a bunch of other things. So I'm down 6 people there and then 6 people that aren't counting shifts. So currently the positions are all filled, but we have 12 that essentially are not counting towards
That's like a
the
whole
shifts.
shift, right?
That's a hold. The good news is once the current people go to the fire academy, start November 15th, and they graduate January 31st, they'll come back on shift and they'll be just about ready to count towards shift. So it's a little waiting time. We've had the injuries obviously have been unexpected. That every time my phone rings, I'm not excited to hear that. But we are slowly addressing it, and I know it's a big number. I know the chief's come before the board in the past and has said that the overtime account in general is underfunded, and that's something that we're looking at, something we've worked with the town manager on in regards to look at just assessing it overall. But yes, we are hoping that it does calm down. We also have had a lot of people leave for other departments for various reasons, and that has created the additional openings. And as we bring new people on, trying to get them up to speed and where they are and counting towards shift is compiled our problem. And with that being said, I had the fire inspector just gave his notice the other day, so he's leaving. The good news is he doesn't really generate a lot of overtime, so that's one positive.
So we try to address it through Article 2 by a one-time bump of 100 that we expect to be permanent, 50 which is coming out of ambulance. These supplemental ones are a result of this unanticipated increase. I know, we're
I
hoping,
understand the unanticipated stuff. I'm curious, like, have we done a comparison with other communities about like what percentage of the budget is going towards overtime? Have we, like, I know that we just went up in staffing. Have we considered a temporary step back by 1 or 2 employees per shift? Like, I am very, very supportive of the department. I'm supportive of the long-term goals to have more firefighters on duty so that we can have more people responding to calls. I understand that, like, we can't run an ambulance with one person. I get these things. But when it turns into, hundreds of thousands of dollars coming out of reserve, which has already happened for last year, and now an extra $100,000, we're moving money from it starts to turn into like, I think the townspeople have the right to ask the question of, like, why is this happening?
Sure. Our minimum staffing is 9 a shift. However, we also will put out the overtime to fill to 9. But if we can't get 9, we'll run at 8 and we won't order somebody on. And under the firefighter's contract, if they get ordered on, it's double time and a half. So we do everything we can to avoid ordering someone on, but realistically and safely, we cannot operate below 8 for sure.
This is sort of in that vein. I think we'd asked this question before. What other strategies have you taken to, and again, nobody wants to see reduction in services and less firefighters being able to respond, but there is a point. We've got other department heads in the room that are not coming before the Finance Committee asking for these similar things. At least one other that is 24/7 year-round, another one during bad weather is 24/7. They haven't come here looking for time after time after time. Are there folks in admin positions who should be manning trucks? Are there, what strategies have you taken? It just seems like, again, to Michael's frustration and to mine, and I think others, maybe, that, this is just a constant, every meeting, it's a transfer or request into that overtime count. That cancellation of time off, not letting people take, only so many people can take the day off per shift,
Sure. We already limit the time that people can take off per shift. And in the past, and we've dealt with it through contract negotiations as far as trying to take back some of the time that has been bargained over the years that has been given to them. In the past, I've worked here. This is my 30th year here. In the past, for contract negotiations, the town typically has given more time than money on certain aspects in certain years. And that's built up. And at this point, last negotiations, they gave back a bunch of time. So we've been working on it through some contract stuff. I'll be honest, the biggest thing hitting us is people leaving. We had a lot of people leave last year and getting back to where we need to be, and they're going to other departments, and we're trying to recruit and actively recruit and maintain the people that we have. But it's an extremely competitive market out there, and there's not as many people looking to do this job as there was before. And in the past, we'd be able to hire somebody that was already academy trained, already able to come to the department. Now we're getting people, as we call them, green as day. We have to completely train them. And it's a lot more work, but we're hiring some very good people. And I understand your frustrations with us coming before you. I do understand the frustrations. It's the same on this end.
Yeah,
we
I
get it.
appreciate that.
We have looked at other departments in regards to their overtime budgets. They do tend to be higher than ours for the similar size operations and how we're running.
Would it be fair to make the observation that a lot of the expense that we've seen, and we've talked about as a board in a panel with managers and yourselves, the really contractually driven, that the majority of the expense, because we are talking about people are out on leave, you have to pay them, stuff like that. So I would venture to think that part of our expense is it's contractually driven, and maybe that's some of the offset is due to the fact that we're not funding it until we absolutely know we have to?
I mean, some of that would be true.
I just had a question in general. The concern over people leaving, is that simply a dollars and cents thing? Or is that, my concern is that we're going to, as a town, if that's something we're not addressing, that we're pushing people through the academy, paying for them to go to the academy, training them, basically prepping them to go to a competitive municipality to work for them. And so is there anything we're doing to, I don't want to say sweeten the pot, but essentially make Auburn a more competitive market for firefighters so that we're not like in a loop of this happening over and over again? Because like one-off injuries and things like that are something that we can, understandably so, like there's going to be waves of that. But if this is a matter of competition amongst the other towns and cities, then, I mean, turnover is usually pretty cyclical, where we would end up seeing 15% turnover, 20% turnover year over year over year. So I'm just curious if there's anything we're doing with that to.
Better off raising salaries than paying double time and a half.
Yeah, it's just that's more of an operational
So
question. than
those
just-
concerns typically bubble up when we go to the table.
Yep.
And we do our comp sci comparisons. I can tell you, the last time we sat down with the union, that we were competitive. But things change. I mean, it's a 3-year cycle, and there could be some communities out there that have given COLAs and some other benefits that exceed ours at this point in time. And maybe that's why people jump, because they see that the grass may be greener on the other side in terms of compensation and other benefits. But those communities tend to settle their contracts not the same cycle we're on, so those considerations have already been taken into consideration. But yeah, we take a look at things such as that, and how do we retain our employees, and what can we do reasonably? What can we afford? I mean, and those things all communities are facing. So that's something that we are about to go to the table very soon, and we'll begin to have those discussions relative to, I guess, some of the concerns that we're looking at now.
Yeah, I just, that seems like a different, it's, because the conversation started based more on injuries and people on timeout, and then it kind of shifted towards more about turnover. And I think those are just two separate issues. I just want to make sure that we're.
We look at our injuries too. I mean, if we have a lot of back injuries, then we try to provide training that will hopefully be preventive in nature. So, yeah, we look at all of that.
I would just, I'm sorry, Steve, I'll get you next. I would just suggest, basically on Michael's comment, that, that money may be better utilized. You're seeing throughout public safety, police, fire, there's agencies out there that are offering sign-on bonuses. Sign on for $25,000 a year, you're academy trained, but you sign a 3-year commitment, and that you'd have 4 firefighters that would jump on the truck and just have to learn the town operations. And it is an attractive town. It's a busy community. It's not a sleepy place where, it's young firefighters, I think, would come here. I think you just need to find a way to get them here and then lock them in so that we're not, this cycle, I don't see it going away unless we make some changes, and I don't think it's sustainable long-term. Steve, I'm sorry.
Is all, excuse me, is all overtime double time and a half, or just some of it?
No, it's just, the only time it's double time and a half is if they're being forced on a shift. Otherwise, the overtime is a normal time and a half, other than Christmas and Thanksgiving, which is double time and a quarter.
But that is a strategy. If you play your cards right, double time and a half is, you can kind of hold back and we know you're going to get forced instead of.
I'll be honest, our guys are really good about not holding back, and nobody honestly really wants to get forced. If they can step up for the overtime, they will. However, I don't want to give you a whole bunch of things, but change in society and culture, and the younger kids don't want to do the overtime like the older people do on the department, and that's just a shift you see everywhere. I think between both fire and police. It's just something that we've noticed.
He's smiling.
Any other questions relative to this one? Hopefully this will move along in some of our other discussions too. I think we've,
Smiling because he's saying, I'm glad it's not me up at the podium.
okay. So we had Article 12 discussing the $118,000 from the sale of the equipment. Any additional questions?
Would it be fair at this time to ask that, given what's on the table in front of us, that it'll probably be into the new year before we'll be discussing this again?
I am certainly hoping so.
Great. That's a great answer. Thank you.
Motion to recommend approval.
We have a motion to recommend approval and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
This one's from the Fire Station Building Committee. See if the town meeting will vote to repurpose funds by amending Article 2 of the January 30th, 2024 special town meeting as follows. Authorize the sum of $100,000 from the current balance of $514,002.61 and the acquisition of 10 Prospect Street be used for the purpose of contracting with an owner's project manager, OPM, to work with the Fire Station Building Committee for conceptual and schematic designs of a new fire headquarters located at 10 Prospect Street. Town Manager, can you answer this one as to what, how this money came available and?
Sure, so this is the residual balance from the 4.6 million appropriated from free cash that allow for the acquisition of the property of roughly $4,050,000. And the demolition money, there's a contract that was awarded for $180,000. That has not been encumbered yet, so the 514 does include roughly $180,000 for demo. So that's going to leave, let's call it $330,000 available to address a $100,000 ask by a vote of the Fire Station Building Committee at their first meeting that would allow to bring an OPM on early in the stages of consideration before it goes to the voters to oversee and try to minimize costs as best that they can. So I got to tell you, I'm very impressed with the composition of the building committee. I think we have some very good and dedicated people. They're working hard, and they're going to sharpen their pencils and try to do the best they can to bring a complete project to the voters of the community, hopefully in May. But this OPM is going to oversee all of those recommendation and costs to see if they're, if it's in the best interest of the town.
Yeah, I just, for the record, I am on that committee. And there's there's a great representation there of tradesmen and contractors and people that are in that profession. And they all, recommended that this was the right way to go. This provides the town with some guidance through this process, and it's money well spent.
Just a question. Is this like this is a third, we have a design firm and this is a third party that sort of like represents our
He
interests?
represents the owners, which is us. Yeah.
And just for point of order, we approved the 514, that 100,000 as an expense to that isn't already rolled into that? We have to break
No,
this out?
because the purpose wasn't identified originally as part of the cost.
But the cost was, what was the original purpose of the 514?
Acquisition and demolition.
And the OPM isn't considered part of the demolition?
No.
Okay. Motion to recommend.
Second.
Okay, on Article 13, we have a motion to recommend approval and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Article 14 from the town clerk. I see the town meeting will vote to repurpose CIP funds by amending Article 4 of the annual town meeting of 2023, book map repairs in the sum of $10,000 to authorize pole pad replacement and supplies in the sum of $10,000. We do have the town clerk here. Does anybody have any questions relative to this one, or?
Motion to recommend approval?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to recommend approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. This one from the town accountant to vote to appropriate $25,000 from the overlay surplus for assessor evaluation, training support, and services. Any questions on Article 15?
Motion to recommend approval?
Second?
Motion and a second to recommend approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Article 16 is from the Police Department, from Chief of Police. See, the town meeting will vote to repurpose the sum of $28,000 originally borrowed and approve of the purchase of an electronic fingerprint scanner, to authorize the sum of $28,000 to purchase 4 Motorola portable radios. And anything, the Deputy Chief here, sir, do you want to discuss this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I really hope none of our people are watching the meeting, because if they hear about double time and a half, we're in dire straits. So hopefully that won't be a thing.
This is on YouTube, you know. 'Cause-
So this account was identified by the CFO. It was prior to my involvement with CIP, or I had no information about this. The only information I am aware of is that the scanner was eventually, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts had a grant program where they provided the fingerprint scanners. And from what I understand, they'll continue to provide them. So at this point, that cost or that need had already been satisfied by the Commonwealth. So the CFO was nice enough to bring this to our attention, and we do need more portable radios. And unfortunately, there's about a 6 or 7 month lead time with receiving the radios. So that's where we're at.
Any questions relative to the, to Article 16? Okay, we have a motion to recommend for approval,
Second.
and we have 2 seconds. Patrick, we'll give it to Patrick. The tie goes to Patrick. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Article 17, town meeting will vote to appropriate $27,000 from general fund revenues to cover the cost of repairs to the DPW Highway Division loader number 18. We have the DPW representatives here. I didn't know the loaders all had, do they have numbers or names or?
Yes, yeah. But good evening. No, so this is, like it says, one of our highway loaders. We have 3. Needed repairs at the end of the last fiscal year. We had to put it off because of the high cost of it. We did get quotes for this job. The $27,000 represents what we expected the cost to be for this repair at the time that it was actually out for repair. We have since gotten it back. The cost was higher than what we anticipated because they found additional things wrong with this loader. Ended up being about $39,000. That represents about 21% of our entire budget for the year for motor vehicle maintenance. So the hope is to recoup some of that cost. We are expecting, again, high fleet maintenance costs. We did increase the budget this year, and we split it up by the different departments that we service to better track those costs. But we're expecting some potential personnel turnover, and we're hoping that it won't affect our operations, but it could result in some things being sent out more. We're doing our best to avoid that, but I'm just trying to get ahead of any of those potential budgetary issues that we might face, especially with this very large repair.
Any questions on this one? Can I just ask for, like, how old is number 18 and what is the cost and where purchases, like, is our loaders in the CIP budget as they age out?
Yeah, we don't have a new loader in our CIP over the next few years. So this is our second oldest loader. I believe it's only about 10 years old. They tend to last about 25 to 30, depending on how well they're treated. So this is something that, and I haven't gotten quotes for a new loader. So I couldn't tell you what the cost of a replacement is, but looking at other equipment, it was prudent to repair this one. We'll likely get another 10 years out of this. The oldest loader in our fleet is probably, it's nearing the end of its life. And I don't know that it's in critical need of replacement once it does go down, but it would be probably a couple years out.
Thank you. Any other questions? Do we have a motion on Article 17?
Motion to recommend approval?
We have a motion and a second to recommend approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Article 18, see if town meeting will vote to appropriate $250,000 from the sewer retained earnings to procure engineering and construction services for the design and construction of a sewer and manhole rehabilitation project, which is needed to repair known sewer defects in several locations throughout the town based on the recommendations presented in the Year 1 Sewer System Evaluation Survey. Want to cover this one too?
Yep. So I know it's a bit of a mouthful there. So we completed the Year 1 Sewer System Evaluation Survey back in 2022. The initial recommendations from that survey included the repair of one of the large trunk sewers that goes through an easement off of Goddard Drive, which we are currently in the design phase of, and we're going to be seeking SRF loans for that. This represents the second sort of high priority items that came from that survey. It's about 24 or so different defects around town as opposed to one large one. So this will clear up some of the larger known defects that are contributing to inflow and infiltration into our sewer system, which is something that we're mandated by Mass DEP to survey, identify, and repair as needed. So this would cover, the intent would be for this cost to cover design and construction. We have a design proposal, design and bidding for about $50,000, and a construction estimate around $200,000.
Any questions? You have a motion?
Motion to recommend approval?
I have a motion to recommend and a second to recommend approval. All in favor? Thank you. See, tell me about to vote $15,000 from sewer retained earnings for the purchase of a sewer CCTV inspection vehicle.
All right, so this one is sort of in conjunction with the next article as well. We have a $80,000 CIP item that we've carried forward from last year for the replacement of a pickup truck. Reviewing the needs of our division, we decided that having a third pickup truck in our fleet wasn't critical. So we looked at other potential needs. It is nice to have a third vehicle, and right now what we have for CCTV equipment requires a trailer that it's really on its last legs, and it's extremely cumbersome to kind of tow around town, get set up. So that's ready to be retired. So what we would hope to do is use that money that was originally appropriated for in our capital budget for the replacement of a pickup truck to put that towards a CCTV van. This particular article would kind of close the gap on what we expect the actual cost of that to be.
Any questions on this one? Your motion?
Motion to can we do two at a time? Motion to recommend approval of 19 and 20?
Sure, let me just read 20 into the record before we do it. Just, so Article 20 is to repurpose the sum of $80,000 remaining balance in truck replacement used for purchase of a new sewer CCT inspection vehicle, the DPW sewer division. So do we have a motion to take for Articles 19 and 20 to?
Motion to take the articles together.
Doesn't really help us, right? We had a motion together to,
Yeah. For two, not really.
so we'll do 19. We have a motion for 19?
Motion to recommend approval of 19.
Second.
And we have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
And we have a
Should
motion,
recommend 20.
we have a motion to recommend 20, thank you, and a second for Michael, is that, did you do the second on that one? Okay.
did.
Okay, Patrick got the first, Michael got the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, we did have 20, oh, well, who's, you're going to cover, that's cemetery, I'm sorry. Vote to appropriate $8,000 from expendable cemetery perpetual care account for the purchase of a hopper spreader for salt applications by the DPW and cemetery superintendent. Any questions?
Motion to recommend approval?
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
22, vote to appropriate $100,000 from the Packagug Golf Course retained earnings to pave cart paths and make golf course improvements from DPW Director and the Golf Course Superintendent.
Motion to recommend.
We do have the, did you want to speak on it, or?
Depends on how we're going to vote, right?
You can, yeah, because we have 80,000 on the next one as well. So. Good evening.
So we're looking to make some improvements at the golf course. We appropriated some money for irrigation and drainage. These are more of kind of more instant improvements where we make. We've had a really great year because we haven't had any rain. One of the biggest things that we deal with is when it rains, we can't use golf carts because it makes a mud pit. So this will give us the ability to have carts more often and more quicker, getting them out quicker once the rain stops. So
Did you want to touch upon, I'm sorry, Michael.
I should say, for the CFO or the town manager, I just want to confirm, we got the retained earnings calculations. There's 1.16 million in that account after total liabilities, so this is like fully covered by golf cart revenues, and I mean.
This is, I'll tell you, this is one thing I'm proud of what we have accomplished since the golf course opened. Retained earnings continues to grow, but it's time to make some investments in our assets. So we've been talking about this for a while. I think there'll be definitely a payback as a result of making these improvements to the golf course. But we continue to grow and increase our annual revenue every year. So there'll be future enhancements coming down the road as well as it relates to irrigation and drainage. But we're having some studies done now. So that may require a larger commitment and a potential borrowing, but our level of profit on an annual basis should be able to support that. But we want to incrementally make these enhancements.
I'm just wondering, because if we have drainage issues, are the drainage issues going to affect the repaving? Would it make more sense to do the drainage completely first?
So that was one of my concerns, but we are working with our consultant who is doing our drainage study to make sure that when we're paving something, we're not going to be paving where the drainage is going.
Any additional questions? On 22, do we have a motion on that one?
Motion recommend approval?
Motion to recommend approval and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And on Article 23, to vote to appropriate $80,000 from the Pack Jog Golf Course retained earnings to rebuild bunkers. Any questions on this? Do I have a motion?
Question? Nope.
Second.
We have Michael making a recommendation for approval, is that correct?
Correct.
Did I understand that correctly? And Patrick was the second? Okay. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think that sums up the articles. And we just have one transfer. We've already discussed. It's relative to the fire department. I don't think we get. You can sit down, sir. I think you've done your due diligence tonight. So this transfer is coming from the firefighter salary account, amount requested $100,000, going to the overtime account. Reason given to cover overtime expenses for shift vacancies, for on and off-duty injuries, as well as new employees in field training that do not count towards shift minimums.
My only question is for Karen, I think, more than for you. The 130,000 that's in there, that's like the unencumbered remainder throughout the course of the year, and we've filled all the positions, so I'm assuming there's like no concern that we're going to need any of this money to get through the year?
That's correct. We looked at the encumbrances and everything in there, so that's what's available as of right now.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Yes, we
Motion to
approve
approve.
transfers. Okay,
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The last one also from the firefighter salary account, amount requested, I believe that's $3,800, going to the travel account. Reason given, conference travel and reimbursement expenses for members attending both the International Association of Arson Investigators and First Due Unify conferences. Questions on that one? My only question on that one, Deputy, would be, were these conferences were you not aware of these conferences coming up? Or were there trainings that were scheduled these conferences or weren't aware of? You wanted to send people, why the unexpectedness of this one and not in the?
They were not expected to come up. This conference came up. So First Due, which I'm sure guys probably do not know what it is, but it's our records management system. Everything from fire incident reporting to all inspections within the community to our truck checks, work orders, assets, basically encompasses our whole operation just on a records management system. And soon, proud to announce, hopefully January 1st, with a component called Community Connect, where we get to engage with the citizens. They'll get to log in, create their own accounts. They'll be notified anytime the fire department goes to their property. They can update pictures of their pets, locations of their kids, their bedrooms, and it will be in real time on our iPads within the truck. So this conference we went to, there was 3 of us that went for the tech team that we have. We're really building the system out and getting to know the system, and this conference had come up after the budget and everything had been prepared, but we thought that it was very essential in order for our people to attend, for us to fully use the records management system that we have.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Do we have a motion?
Motion to recommend, motion to approve.
A motion to approve and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any, we had some transfers of the town account CFO that were under $250. Do we have any questions on any of those? If not, we'll consider those approved. I don't think we need to vote on those.
I just had one point of clarification. I thought that and this could be because I've been on the committee, I thought the CFO authorization was during the transition of year end. I didn't know that. Did we vote somewhere that it was to continue all year? Thank you for that clarification. Okay.
In minutes, unless there's questions, we'll consider those to be.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
July's, I believe we met last July, and those minutes aren't in here, so they'll be forthcoming. So the reason why I'm asking, and I wanted to bring it up for conversation because the minutes aren't here, and I'm hoping that they'll be in the next set, is I had raised the question of the board not doing remote participation anymore. And then I left it sort of as can we get some feedback? And I was just wondering, I have my thoughts, but did we get an answer on that? Remote
I
participation?
believe there have been 2 committees who voted not to, or voted to discontinue the remote.
Right.
The planning board being one of them, and I believe ZBA. Yeah.
So can I entertain a motion?
And I think the school committee is considering it as well.
Can I entertain a motion this evening that we stop remote access?
Yeah, I don't believe it's on the agenda. I think that would be,
Because it's not on the
we
agenda.
could ask that to be on the agenda for the next meeting, and I think
Sure.
we're also talking reorganization for the next meeting, once hopefully Ed is back and we've got a full committee, we'll do the reorg, and I think that's a good one to have everybody on board.
Well, as long as it's before town meeting,
Which one?
the next meeting.
Do we need to meet before? We've approved everything, so I don't know that we'll need to meet. We'll just need
You
to
won't
meet.
have a full board then, because I won't be present.
Or,
The next the meeting at town meeting.
yeah, so I don't think we'll need to have one at town meeting because we've approved all the warrant articles tonight.
Okay, so it'll be after that.
So it'll be after that. Yeah, certainly we like to have people in attendance still want to attend.
So we have to wait and get it on the agenda then. Can I ask through the chair that Sharon, can you add that to the agenda, or do we?
Yeah, do we?
Yes, that's the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll add that to the agenda for the next full meeting, and we'll do the reorganization at that time as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It's a good, I like the recommendation. Scripts. Okay, if we have nothing else, no other questions?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second. That was Patrick and then Michael. You should have got it. You got it, okay. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody.